Give a little introduction for HAA, MOCA, our hot allocations in our 5 offered grant programs. I'll talk about the steps prior to paneling service, which is our review process, and then talk specifically about the panel service, how we select our panelists, reviewing and scoring our applications, and then a couple takeaways for you all to take home or some important points that are covered throughout the presentation. First, we'll talk about HAA and MOCA, introduction to our hot allocations. So Houston Arts Alliance is a local arts and culture organization whose principal work is to implement the City of Houston's vision, values, goals for its arts grantmaking and civic art investments. HAA's work is conducted through contracts with the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, also known as MOCA. And we also execute privately funded projects to meet the needs of the arts community in areas such as disaster preparation, arts education equity for Houston students, research on the state of the arts in Houston, and temporary public art projects which help vitalize neighborhoods. So speaking about one of those contracts, the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, whom we refer to again as MOCA, they oversee our work through our contract, and they also work to shape policy, practice in our sector, advocate on behalf of the sector for important resources and opportunities, and of course, they help advance other city departments' arts and cultural initiatives. So let's talk about those funding sources again. What you see is here HA in the middle. So we are both private and publicly funded. Private funding is for special projects. Public funding, again, is for civic art investments and our grant making. Special projects for private funding comes from organizational or individual donors. Civic art investment comes from a Houston Civic Art Ordinance. And specifically for grant making, it comes from hot revenue. So for this purposes of this presentation, I'll just talk about grant making. So grant making comes from hotel bookings, or part of the public funding comes from hotel bookings. That's from hotels, motels, Airbnb, and bed and breakfasts. And when people book those spaces, they of course, I'm sorry if you hear my dogs in the background, they of course pay taxes, and a percentage of that tax is dedicated to promote arts and cultural tourism. This tax is known as the hotel occupancy tax. It is then collected quarterly, and once it's collected for disbursement, it's known as hot revenue. And of course, that then goes to the City of Houston. Once it goes to the City of Houston, they allocate it to these 4 different groups. First is Houston First, then the Mayor's Office of Special Events, Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, and of course, HAA. Once it comes to HAA, we allocate those to HAA administrative costs, a direct pass-through to Miller Outdoor Theater, and of course, our competitive grants. So of the funding we receive, hot revenue allocations are determined by our contract with the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, and they're split into those 3 groups that I mentioned earlier. 9% goes to administrative costs, HAAs, and then 16.5% goes to a direct payment or a pass-through to Miller Outdoor Theater, and the bulk goes to 74.5% to the grants for the community or grant making. Once that is further divided, that's 74.5% that's allocated to grant making. 2.5% is allocated towards City's Initiative, which is a special program that individuals and organizations can apply for. And then there's an even distribution between 36% that is allocated toward organizations under 10 million and individual and creative artists and creatives. And then 36% is allocated to organizations over 10 million. And of course, all of those groups are dispersed to our grant programs. So their funding schedules do differ. And what you see here are our 5 programs. SASE, you can apply for up to $15,000, which is 2 application rounds per year. Festival also has 2 application rounds per year, and you can be awarded up to $10,000. SO is 1 application round per year, and that depends upon which category you are placed within for your funding allocation. And then CI and our LCH are our 2 smaller grant programs. LCH, you can get up to $2,500. That one's 3 application rounds per year. And then CI, you can apply for up to $10,000, and that's 4 application rounds per year. So for 4 of these grant programs, we do have videos of our workshops available. If you go to hatx.com/links, they're available for SASE, Festival, SO, and LCH. If you would like to know more about CI, you can check out our guidelines from our website, or you can request specifically a meeting to speak with one of us. For grant funding, based on community input in response to COVID-19 and requesting greater stability due to COVID, HAA changed the schedules for festivals and for SASE. CI and LCH were already cash in hand. SASE and Festival now are cash in hand, just based off of existing funds, and they're not anymore based off of projected income, which will help guarantee grant amounts with greater certainty versus SO, which will still be on a projected income, which is subject to change due to mid-year changes in amounts that are contingent on the economic performance of hotel occupancy tax, HOT, which is based on those hotel bookings that I mentioned earlier. So just to give you a brief idea about the applicant pool for 2020 for SASE, 35% of the applicants were funded, which was 72 out of 205. For SO, 74% were funded, 26 were not, which was 111 out of 250 that were funded. And for Festival, 62% were funded, which was 21 out of 34. And that it was about a half of the applicant pool that was funded, just for these grant programs for 2020. Let's talk about the review process. So this is the life cycle of an application. There's a legend in the bottom right-hand corner just to give you further details to make sure you're following along. Applicants will submit their application. It will go to HAA, where we do an eligibility verification, and there's also a curing period to fix some portions of your applications if they need fixing. And then it goes to the panelists, and they review eligible applications, score them, and then they're ranked based off of those scores. And then based off of HOT, funding is applied until it runs out. And for approval, it goes to the HAA's committee and board, and they vote on integrity, not on the applications themselves, and then it goes to MOCA for final approval. To give you a better idea of the weight of that review process, as staff, we verify eligibility, application completeness, public presentation requirements, and scores of objective criteria. So HAA has a little bit more than the committee and board due to that objective criteria scoring. The peer panel, has the largest job in the review process because their scores determine the funding ranks, and that is what you see here. The committee and the board, they receive the recommendations after the peer panel, and both of those groups do not vote on the grantees or the amounts, which is why they are the lowest of the levels. And then City of Houston, they are sent their recommendations after the HAA committee and board receive them. And they have the final recommendations, but those recommendations are not final until they are signed off on, which is why they have the second highest weight. Sometimes there still is a bit of confusion about HAA's role in the application review. So this is a little bit of a breakdown. We check your eligibility and look for completeness, which means that all required documents and online application fields are completed to be considered within the peer panel review process, which are the minimum requirements to receive a grant divided by HOT policies. From there, again, to further increase the chances for applicants, we do now have a period to fix missing or incorrect application documentation. And then finally, some scoring on the objective criteria, which further increases the efforts of newer applicants. So a little bit more about eligibility. If you're interested, again, you can go to the guidelines. So we do check for physical address in the City of Houston limits. We have a link that we can send to you. It's also in the guidelines for who's your council member, just to see where you fall in line. We do not allow PO boxes. For organizations and fiscal sponsors, we do make sure they are tax exempt by the IRS. For an individual applicant, we make sure you're 18 or older. Organizations, as for SO and Festival, we make sure you have a current SMU data arts profile. For all applicants, we make sure there's a clear public presentation component. For all applicants, that there's one application per grant program per deadline per year. So if you're applying for Festival, again, you cannot apply to SO. but if you are one of those within one of those grant programs, you still can apply for LCH, you still can apply for CI. And of course, any additional specific eligibility requirements in the differing grant programs. And then, of course, these are all just in the guidelines, and all 7 must be met to move forward within your peer panel review process. So you should think of this list as a key to the gate. And the gate, of course, is the peer panel review. So as we check for eligibility, we also check for completeness. So the list you see here is very similar to the previous list, and the bolded bullets are additions from that previous list. So for your profile, whether you're an individual or an applicant, we do use that information for the dashboard and for the grantee list on our website. So when you are awarded, we put your social media accounts in your website and a little blurb about your project on a nice little table on our website. And then for the application form, it increases your chances if it's complete. Of course, the chances of your application do differ if your application is incomplete. For work samples, we do allow 10, 5 of which are PDFs. And this is specifically for the panelists. This is where you show them what you're capable of and who you are. W-9 and ACH forms, those are for both us and for the finance department. We ask to have those a little bit early just to help ease the burden for finance and to make sure that payment process is seamless. And the fiscal sponsorship agreement, if you are fiscally sponsored, is for both us and the panelists, just to make sure you have a balanced review of your application. And the curing process. Proof of residency, it's important that if you do not have one that it doesn't tie back to who you are or who your organization is, we do allow that time for you to make changes. For proof of age, there are instances where it is blurry or it's outdated. So we do allow that time for you to correct that here. If you're an organization, if it's missing, it does knock you into being ineligible. So it's important for you to get these documents in. And then of course, for contents of your narratives, work samples, budget tables, any yes or no questions, those cannot be fixed. So make sure you do allow yourself, to have some time to make sure your content is secure and you do have all of those information available in your application. So even though there is a curing process, make sure you are giving yourself enough time to have all of these complete. And there are, you do have a 3-day period for this period to fix your application. And we do email the email that's on file on your grant portal. And if you do not provide these documents to us within those 3 days, it does deem you ineligible. So again, going back to making sure you have all of these listed, they're good to go before you apply or before you hit submit for that deadline. Objective criteria, these are evaluated by HA grant staff. There are programs variety, payment to artists, stewardship of public resources. For programs variety, it's specifically for festival and SO. It's based on what's within your mission statement via your organization's latest IRS filing. That is worth 5 points. For payment to artists, this is for SASE, festival, and SO. For SASE, it's within your budget table, and for SO, depending upon your category, it's within a budget table, or for festival and SO, the other categories is within that SMU data arts. Artists, applicants paying themselves, we're making sure that's happening, and then also that organizations are paying artists that are participating in their work. And then stewardship of public resources, this is specifically for SO. This is within data arts, just to make sure you have fiscal responsibility, and that's demonstrated within that budget table. Let's go to panel service. Panelists include a diversity of skills, self-identities, experience, which all ensure that they are able to properly assess merit in each of the applications. We seek to represent the various Houstonians and visitors that our cultural community serves. And if you are interested in being a panelist, you can apply here at hatx.com/panelist application. We consider the following types of diversities when we assemble our group of panelists, and that is highest level of degree, location, gender identity, ethnic identity, art form expertise, and professional expertise, all of which so we can have a well-rounded panel group. So just give you an idea based off of 2019 and our 2020 grants panelists, For the highest level of degree completed, 41% were masters, 31% were bachelors, and then it was almost about even throughout the rest of the groups. For age, a large amount was from 25% to 50, 25%, 25 to 55, and from 56 to prefer not to say, there were lower levels. For location, majority came from local being Houston, and 12%, which was regional, whether they were from Austin, San Antonio, Corpus Christi, places around Texas, within Texas, those are considered regional. And then for national, you'll see around here, it was about 14%. We had individuals that are from a range of places from California to Florida to DC and Minnesota. And we do sometimes allow for global, but we didn't have any global from 2019 to 2020. For gender identity, majority 63% were female, and of course 34% were male, 3% were non-binary, and 0% prefer not to answer. And for ethnic identity, 29% were Black, 26% were Latinx, 22% were non-Hispanic or white, and then they're about an equal range for Asian and Middle Eastern, and then Native American was the lowest, and Southeast Asian for 1%. For art form expertise, multidisciplinary, that was the highest for 16%. Visual arts and administration were tied for 10. And then of course, all the rest were pretty close until we got to dance, film, craft, and then archaeology, history, and preservation. Professional expertise, 14% came from community organizing and 13% had panel experience. Then of course, the lower ones were marketing and tourism, grants administration, and social practice, and capacity building, digital media strategy. So once we select our panelists, we do need a large number of panelists for our larger grant program. So for support for organizations, festival, and SASE, we do have maybe upwards of 20 to 40 panelists. And for our smaller ones, for Cities Initiative and Let Creativity Happen, we do like to have at least 6. But once we select them, and they say, yes, we will be panelists. We do have an orientation, which is about 30 minutes to an hour, which is designed for anyone to ask questions if they have questions and to receive additional information and resources. They do receive a version of this presentation, which gives them an overview of the specific grant program, HA, hot allocations, roles and expectations, conflict of interest, confidentiality. And then of course they do get a demo of how to log in, how to review applications, making sure they're able to log in, and they do of course receive a timeline. Once they said, okay, we still want to do it, they do an independent panel review, and that takes about 2 to 3 weeks. And there are 5 different things that we try to make sure that they abide by, that every applicant has a unique approach and perspective, and they should receive each on their own terms, and to try to avoid comparison between the applications. We try to let them know that to give themselves enough time for each application and to make sure they're taking breaks in between, that a review takes about 15 to 20 minutes per application, and review fatigue can impact the honesty and validity of the scoring, so they need to make sure they're taking a break whenever they need to. For grammar and merit, grammar, small errors in spelling, they shouldn't be in consideration in the merit and strength of the application, as long as it doesn't inhibit the communication and understanding of the project or the concept of the application. Next was be open and mindful to the breadth of arts and cultural applications that occur across the city of Houston, that the application represent a broad range of artistic expression, and panelists should be open to and mindful of artistic expression or methods that may fall outside of their best understanding or knowledge, and to strive to see and assess the applicant's work to the best of their ability. And panelists are also encouraged to express any areas of confusion or raise questions rather than assuming low quality. And lastly, success does look different for each applicant. So there is no set standard for a successful project or application, as it does look different across all applications. And these are just, of course, 5 of the guiding things that we do speak towards during the independent panel review. Among those things are code of ethics, conflict of interest, and confidentiality. Code of ethics, it's imperative, of course, to not disclose confidential information, making sure they're not receiving bribes, and they do announce if they're affiliated with an applicant. And if they are affiliated with an applicant, we do ask them to stop reviewing the application and submit a conflict of interest form, just detailing that they do have a conflict of interest. And of course, for confidentiality, they should maintain confidentiality and to keep all information received, during the panel process confidential until notifications are sent. So part of their overall panel application review, what we do provide are the grant guidelines. And then for Season Initiative, there are a couple other things they can review for them to just be aware and be abreast of what's going on within the guidelines. They are listed specifically in the guidelines, but just to be helpful, we do get them to them at the same time we give them the guidelines. So the same guidelines panelists receive are the same guidelines the applicants receive. And the review criteria are also listed within the guidelines. And then they also are able to look at the social resume, which is a review of their online presence and event successes. They do not have access to that through the application itself, but this specifically is put here just to detail more about how, as an applicant, you can make sure your social resume is good to go for the panelist, because you can include those within your application itself. So the grant guidelines is a comprehensive guide that we do have for the applicants that has all the information they need to apply to grant programs. We advise both applicants and panelists to read these through thoroughly. Let's see, particularly for applicants, number one, what grant program is right for me, since we do have several. This will help you as far as where to or what program you can apply for. Assistance is if you need further questions, that's for both panelists and applicants. And the rest, again, other information that were within the presentation, where our funding comes from, what are the requirements and other application questions, and then a timeline after decisions are made and final reporting. The review criteria for the panelists, there are 3 different groups: artistic programming, public benefit, and stewardship of public resources. Detailed project proposal and the digital experience for LCH. And then for public benefit, this is the marketing and service, programs location and programs variety for SO, and like CI is community engagement. And then of course there is the budget table, which is the stewardship of public resources. Social resume, again, this is not something the panelists can view, but this is something that can help your application within the work samples, just to show them what you're capable of. And that can be whether that's through your marketing information, your Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or website, and with your demographics, of course, just to be specific and to give further detail on who you are as an organization, what you're capable of, and then for an individual, of course, where you live and how you're able to help a specific neighborhood or community or whatever topic you are looking towards getting funded. Panel discussion. Of course, to be objective and to include constructive feedback. This is right after the 2 to 3 weeks of the independent review. This typically lasts for the larger 4 hours or more. It just depends upon how many applications we do receive. And if they are the more larger applications we have, the more likely it is that we are going to randomly assign you to different groups, just for the sake, so that you're not overwhelmed, because we do not give panelists more than 40 applications. And so anyone who does attend the group discussion, they're expected to have all the applications completely reviewed. They do not have to be submitted, because we do allow some time after this date to make sure that they're final, because there is a discussion. And of course, you can change your comments and your scores if you would choose to do so. But of course, bring these comments to the group review, and they should be objective, include constructive feedback, as I said. They should be observations that are beneficial to the applicants because they do receive these panel comments if they would like to receive them. Of course, also, this is a chance for them to amend their scores and to modify any comments. And this is, of course, right now just virtual. We're not looking to see anything in person right now. So the differences between HAA and the panelist discussion roles, we manage the application process, and we do, of course, do the eligibility so that panelists themselves can do that preliminary review and score the applications. During the discussion, we act as moderators and we do transcribe so we can give further comments that are not within the comments themselves by the panelists to the applicants, just so they can have that information. And of course, it's up to you all to attend the panel review. And then we do provide all of those information from the latter part or the beginning part of this presentation to the panelists, and it's up to you all to contribute to the group discussion. It's beneficial not only for the flow of the discussion, but also beneficial to the applicants themselves. And so we are able to answer some questions, but of course we can't speak to the applications themselves. And you all as panelists would be providing recommendations for the grants committee and sharing your positive and constructive feedback to the applicants. And of course they will be anonymous. And what we also do is make sure that we are ensuring alignment with the funding goals, grant guidelines, and scoring rubrics, and making sure you are just to make sure the conversation is flowing if it's not flowing so well. So once the group discussion is over, we do finalize those scores. We give you a couple of days, most likely a day, to finalize to finish your scores, and then we basically submit them. So we lock them so you can't do any more submissions, and we take an average of those scores except for the SO grant category. We rank them based off of those scores. And then based off of those scores and the funding allocations, or how much funds or HOT has allowed, we apply the funding until it runs out. And of course, we do take a little bit of time to put together a dashboard, and that's where your other marketing information on your profile comes together. And we send that to the board, and then it goes to the city of Houston. Again, the board, they vote on the panelists just to make sure that it is a diverse group. They do proofread it, which is great for us. And of course, they don't vote on the recommendations themselves. And MOCA, they do take a look at this dashboard, and they recommend it from there for final approval. So this is a visual representation of the timeline. Our application is typically open for 4 weeks or a month, just to give everyone an ample amount of time to apply. And then from there, about 2 to 3 weeks, we do eligibility verification. And again, that's also dependent upon how many applications we get. And we allow those 3 days for the curing process. Also during that stage, we are selecting our panelists. We do have that database. And so we take people from that database, and then a couple of days, about a week, we give them time to respond to whether or not they would be interested and able to be within our panel. And then about 2 to 3 weeks, or after that orientation, that 1 hour orientation, they do that independent review, which is 2 to 3 weeks. They have about a 4-hour discussion. And then we do process the honorarium because we do pay our panelists. It's about 2 to 3 weeks for them to expect payment. So once discussion is done, we quickly come together and create that dashboard. And as we're doing, the honorarium processing at the same time, we're sending all of that to the committee and board, and the committee and board takes about 2 weeks collectively, and then MOCA takes about a max of 4 weeks to do a final recommendation or final approval. And as soon as they approve it, we send our declination or approval letters. We also do, or MOCA does do, an announcement, and then we also prepare our panel comments during this time right after if you do request them. So it's all contingent upon whether or not you request them. And then it takes a maximum of 10 weeks to send out those panel comments. Lastly, some takeaways. Orientation, again, 30 minutes to an hour, and it's just to assist panelists with tools and information they do need. Independent review is right after that. It's 2 to 3 weeks. It does take 15 to 20 minutes per application for review. Group discussion is about 2 to 4 hours, again, depending upon how many applications there are. And then we do pay our panelists a $200 honorarium, and that is contingent upon convening for that group discussion that you have your reviews completed. As an applicant, here are 5 things to keep in mind. 1, make it make sense. Because as you're going through your application, just to make sure that it flows and that your narrative also does correlate with your budget table. Any other section does have a correlation between each other. And then, of course, with this, it's just to start early. And then 2, for document management, we also suggest you work in a different document, transfer it over. If not, as you're going through, making sure that you click Save Draft. If you do not click Save Draft, it is not saved. That's why we also do suggest working within a different document. Next, be unique. If you are unique, it does increase your competitiveness. If they're seeing the same things that are going on in the real world, or they're noticing within the applications that they're pretty similar, it doesn't really increase your competitiveness. And then for the specificity, focus on the why and now. The more specific you are, it gives the it gives the panelists a better idea of what you're trying to convey and what you're actually trying to put on. And next, payment to artists, not only but pay yourselves, but pay the artists that you're also working with. Another thing would be to think about the impact in the field and the broader issues, and then get other people to read your application. So you keep rereading it, but it's also great to have other eyes just to make sure that it makes sense, of course. And then always to think about your audience. I mean, it might flow to you, but make sure that it flows to other people. As a panelist, number 1, provide thorough feedback. This feedback does allow room for them to improve, to keep applying. Especially for CI or LCH, they can keep applying. Well, for CI, once they're awarded once, that's all they're awarded. But of course, you can only apply with 1 proposal. You can't keep repeating the same proposal for like LCH or CI. And then for preparation, be prepared to discuss. It's great when the conversation is flowing. You do come eager with discussion questions or what your thoughts were. But also to be objective, which is like neutral guidance and clarity, and use your knowledge. You all are here for a reason, so to make sure that you do showcase your unique expertise, and then to expand. Of course, over the course of the discussion, people will say like, I agree, but if you agree, please be sure to add additional information, because again, all of this would be sent anonymously to the applicants, and they would love to have all of your feedback. And then thank you. We are here to support you if you have any questions. Again, here are all of our beautiful faces. And if you ever need anything else, you can reach out to us through our support desk or hatx.com/links. And now, if you have any questions, because of course, like I said, I do want this to be a conversation, and we are open and available if you do have any of those questions. Yeah. Deidre, do you have anything to say?
No, really great presentation. This is the first time we've provided this presentation. We are working to do a lot more. It's kind of like knowledge-based types of like workshops that demystify various components of our workshops. And so we're open to any feedback as well. If there are some questions that we didn't answer, feel free to email us or, send us a message in the support desk. I'm curious if anybody is applying this year, and while you have this time, have any questions about the application process. If you don't have any questions about the panel process, because we do have the time to answer a few questions. And if not, that's okay too. We also can put a meeting link in our chat. So we do also offer one-on-one meetings, which some people are more comfortable with as opposed to these group settings. So if you do intend to apply and have some specific questions about your grant application, feel free to schedule one of our 15-minute meeting blocks.
A question about the panelists. So what time frame, I know you said it was like a couple of weeks, but are we looking at October, November, when that usually happens?
Yeah, so during our fall grant cycle, and this timeline shifts, but we're usually in panels for a 2-week period. So the way we, so SASE, Festival, and support organizations all have the same kind of timeline. And we schedule the panels over a 2-week period, and they're typically divided. So for SASE, the support for artists and creative individuals, those panels are divided by discipline. So we have a visual arts, which encompasses a lot. So like film and sculpture and painting panel. And then we have a performing arts panel. So theater, literary arts, dance, music. And then we have a multidisciplinary panel. We usually have a larger volume in the visual arts and performing arts categories. And so those panels are like 1 to 2 days. And that's, so we'll have like a 2-week period between October and November this year. So from like the 21st to, I want to say November, maybe 5th or so, we'll have those panels over that period of time. And then support for organizations is broken up by budget size. And so we have like organizations are paneled together based on their budget size, so capacity. And it's in quartiles, so it's 4 different panels. For category 1, we have one panel that's specific to category 2, and then another panel specific to category 3. So that's a whole other, doing math in my head, 6 days of panels. And then we have a festival panel. Yeah, so it's around the 2-week process between the end of October and beginning of November. Sorry, it was a really long explanation for your very simple question, but since we are demystifying this process, I'm giving a few more details.
And is the panel process when you meet as a group, is that usually done in the evenings or?
It's during the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And if you are on a panel and then later in the year you apply for the Let Creativity Happens, that's possible?
Yeah. So you can participate in a panel. You will just not serve on the panel to the application to which you applied. Okay. Because obviously you're going to give yourself all of the points as you should. So that's the only thing that you're not allowed to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the very thorough presentation and for demystifying the process. I did not realize how important the peer review process was to the grants and the awarding of the grants. I recently received from you, Bree, an invitation to join the panel, so thank you very much. I was just wondering, having not been a recent recipient of one of the HAA grants, would that in any way impact my ability to participate? Just not having our organization have been awarded recently a grant, so not being as familiar with the grant process.
Yeah, so it won't. I believe it was for Cities Initiative, was that correct?
That is correct, the City Initiative.
Yes, so Cities Initiative, perfectly fine, it's a different grant program. So looking for that specifically, let me close out, so I'm being transparent about the different days. Let's see if I can pull it up. So I did say if you do apply, or do let me know by next Monday, That orientation would be next Wednesday, the 25th at 12.
Okay.
And then, of course, you would have 2 to 3 weeks, and the CI discussion would be September 15th. But yes, just because you're a previous applicant, yeah, it's fine. You are, by all means, able to be a panelist, and I would love if you'd be a panelist. So
thank you.
And of course, you can also still apply for festival if you're still interested, because it is a different grant program.
Excellent. Good to know. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other, I guess, aspects of the grant cycle or process? I don't know if anyone has attended any of the other workshops, but are there any other workshops that would be of interest to you all as an applicant that we should consider?
I've applied for the different grants several times, and it would be nice to be able to read through some of the accepted grants to see how they're done. Mm-hmm. I mean, and being on a panel would be extremely helpful too, but just for a reference, that would be really good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, this is Molly from DanceForce. We get asked to review a lot of like independent like choreographer applications before they submit. And I think something that our team sees when we're trying to provide feedback before folks submit is like, I think it would be helpful to do like a really in-depth review of the questions that you're, especially for the individual artists, that like we see, like people aren't always asking, they're not always answering the question you're asking. And so I think maybe like a deep dive into more of just like the basic questions and the budget,
okay.
The project budget for sure on the individual artist.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I go with Molly, and on the budget and what percentage you need to pay artists. And if you're using multiple artists, like if you have a lead artist, with the percentages for that, and then your supporting artists. And if you're limited to, I'm pretty sure you can't bring anyone from out of town.
You can.
You can.
You can bring someone from out of town. You yourself or other collaborators cannot use this grant to pay for travel outside of City of Houston limits, but you can bring talent into the city.
Okay.
In terms of workshop recommendations, has there ever been a workshop that sort of demystifies the SMU Data Arts funder reports and what those mean?
There has not. Had we not run up against time, I did want to do, like I'm always talking to the team over there. I wanted to do a workshop this year, but time kind of got away from us. But it is maybe definitely for next year, that's something that we can tackle. I know they offer a lot of resources. They have a lot of recorded workshops. It's a little different, obviously, when you can kind of tailor some of the content to what's needed, in our community. So I'll actually ask them about that. I'm actually meeting with them on Thursday. So I'll ask them what kinds of workshops they could have, and maybe we'll have that, since I'm already planning next year, have that part of our workshop series.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, well, if something does pop up, feel free to send us a quick little message, and just really appreciate you all taking the time to be with us here today. And thank you, Bree, for putting together a great presentation.
Of course. Thanks for everybody for joining today.
Thank you for your time.
Of course, everyone.
Have a great week.
Same to you. Take care.